Okay, we're ready to get started. Okay, everybody, we're ready to get started. I'm going to call the order of the Finance Committee meeting. It is a very awkward position for me at this point because this was Bernie's spot, and Bernie did it so well. So I'll try to do it as quickly and as well as he does. Do I have have everyone read the minutes, and do I have a motion to approve the Financial Committee meeting minutes? I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. With that, the Finance Committee meeting is adjourned.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In January, we all mourned the loss of the Honorable Bernie McCabe, longstanding Juvenile Welfare Board member and Finance Committee Chair. During his 20 years of service, Bernie was the cornerstone of our board, steadfast in his commitment to ensure accountability and always to do what's best for children. Last month, this board requested a tribute video be produced in his honor, which we're going to show in just a minute. Our board also voted to create a leadership award in Mr. McCabe's name and in the name of his friend and former JWB colleague, the Honorable Bob Dillinger. The Dillinger-McCabe Putting Children First Leadership Award will be bestowed annually to a well-established leader, a game changer, and a champion for Pinellas County children, and an individual who consistently demonstrates leadership, excellence, advocacy, and determination. This year marks Juvenile Welfare Board's 75th anniversary. As such, it presents a very unique opportunity to unveil the Leadership Award at a joint event combining our anniversary with the annual Kids First Awards. The selection committee for the award would be comprised of members of the Juvenile Welfare Board, former board members, and the McCabe and Dillinger family members. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge several guests that are with us today. Mrs. Denise McCabe. Members of the McCabe family, I'm not sure they're here yet. Kay Dillinger. And Bob, are you on Zoom up there? Bob Dillinger is here with us on Zoom today. Welcome. We're glad you're here. It's time to dim the lights and see the tribute video.
We knew each other for quite a while. There was an issue coming up before the Juvenile Welfare Board, and that got Bernie's attention, and that got Senator Latvala's attention. So I called Bernie and I go, would you be willing to be on the board? Because Senator Latvala made it pretty clear that if Bernie didn't want to do it, Senator Latvala wasn't going to do it. And Bernie said, yeah, I'll do it. He and I would differ on certain things, but we differed in a gentlemanly fashion. When things were rough, he would turn to me and go, Dillinger, you're the one that got me into this. And I would go, no, Bernie, you agreed to get into this. And it would go somewhat like that.
I can't remember a time in my life where I didn't know who Bernie McCabe was. He was such a larger-than-life figure. When I first got on the board, even though I had known Bernie for years and years, I was still pretty intimidated by him. As I got to know him and got to serve with him, I realized what a big teddy bear he really is, and really the heart of a public servant.
He was bigger than life in a lot of things to me. But what I did learn from being on the board is that he really did care about the community, that he was very much invested in his role as a board member. And he was more than the state attorney. He actually had a soft part of him. To me, I think he was a big teddy bear.
Bernie would come in through the door, bigger than life, jovial, laughing, kidding, very fun-filled, but very focused on the meeting. What he cared about was that he was going to do what was best for the children of our community.
There's no doubt that my career was better because of Bernie. If there was something that I just wasn't sure of, I knew that I could just give a call over there. Always had time for me.
Always supportive of me, but still willing to explore the pluses and minuses of things. And I always knew his heart was in the right place, but that he had such a fine mind that would help me sort out any situation.
Bernie was so supportive of everybody that worked within the JWB network. He felt that he owed everyone his undivided attention and his loyalty.
I just really want to stress that he really cared for the youth of this community. The aspect of juvenile delinquency and the impact of poverty and truancy, he thought that all the children should have the same shot at success. And he would talk about the unfairness. They wanted to keep them out of adult prisons. He wanted to keep the youth in the juvenile system, and he wanted to make sure that those youth had the opportunity to avail themselves of the services that the taxpayers were paying for through JWB.
Bernie took on his involvement with the JWB as clearly a way of giving back to the children of this community, to ensuring that they had an opportunity to be whatever they wanted to be, and to be able to succeed no matter where they came from. Bernie just saw children in need.
Bernie was the best example all over Florida, all through his working life, of seeking justice and doing justice, caring about the kids, their future, their education, being in favor of rehabilitation of these children, such as the civil citation program and programs for juveniles who were charged with a sex offense so they could get some counseling.
He had his convictions, and the one thing he would never sway from was clearly his love of children and what he was there to do. And he felt that it was more than a job, it was his calling. He took on his role as a board member as a privilege.
I think that he actually cared and took pride in the job that he did as the state attorney, but also I think he took even greater pride as being a member of the Juvenile Welfare Board to make sure that we were accountable as the keeper of the funds for the citizens of Pinellas County and for those agencies that we serve.
I think he honored his time on the Juvenile Welfare Board. It was important to him. One of the favorite things he did was tell me that he knew that my working there was not just a job. And I appreciated that. It wasn't just a job for him either. I know that.
Talk about measurable outcomes. Bernie kept being a big proponent of it. Are the kids any better off? Do our dollars really count? And I have to say that to this day, when we talk about measurable outcomes, we didn't have anything like that when it started.
Bernie McCabe kept us all accountable at the Juvenile Welfare Board. And he kept us accountable not only to the taxpayers and to all of the ethical and legal responsibilities we had, but his timeless refrain was, we need to do what's right for kids.
Is this good for the kids? And a lot of that has to do with making sure the dollars were actually going to the children and to their development.
Bernie led that way, saying, look, what are we getting for our investment? What are we able to show this community that their tax dollars has helped? And that was a constant theme. It started almost from day one. The change from 20 years ago to today is incredible. I think the amount of data that is gathered shows the value of JWB. And I think Bernie would always feel very proud that the board and the staff working together.
Some words that I will remember Mr. McCabe by are firm but fair, steadfast, reliable, servant leader, compassionate, empathetic, and strong.
When I think of Bernie, the few words that come to mind first are accountable, and most importantly, is it the right thing for kids?
I think I would just say he was a big man with a big footprint that made an imprint and an impact by his commitment to service and to justice and to treating everyone fairly.
I think for children specifically, Bernie's legacy is going to be a firm foundation. He was very passionate about early childhood development and early childhood learning. He was also extremely interested in and required evidence-based metrics. What he was trying to do was to prevent children from being put into situations where their life would be altered by the criminal justice system. So a firm foundation and a brighter future, I think, are his legacy for children.
Bernie McCabe had a big heart for kids, and it was all about putting children first. And he worked so well with our long-standing public defender, Bob Dillinger. They worked together to have the best result for kids, and they supported the best programs for kids. And for Bernie McCabe, I think that was a terrific legacy.
He wanted what was best for the children. He wanted it done in a fiscally sound way, but in a caring way. And he wanted the youth that did not have the same advantages that other youth in this community have. That's how I'll remember him, that he wanted to help youth succeed.
He genuinely cared about the children. He genuinely cared about the families. His memory will go down is that he was an advocate for all the families in Pinellas County.
I think I'll miss most the fact that I could always give him a call and run a tricky issue by him, and he would give me his honest and helpful answer.
His stick-to-itiveness and his conviction that no stone would get unturned, no one was left behind, no child would go without a voice.
Whenever Mr. McCabe was around, you knew that things were going to be okay. His presence was comforting, and you knew that you could rely on him if things got tough. He was a rock of direction, of guidance. So I will miss that. I do miss that.
I will miss Bernie's presence in the community at places like Juvenile Welfare Board, places that serve kids, and his special relationship with Bob Dillinger.
I still miss him. We lost an advocate for the youth. I still think about calling him about things, and it becomes really, the pain really sinks in when you realize he's not there. I miss my friend. So it's like I always tear up at these things, and he always said, Dillinger, why are you so emotional? You know, I go, I'm sorry, Bernie, I can't help it. He goes, but I know it's because you care. And that meant a lot.
A special thank you to the staff. Is Gail here or around? Please send word. The video tribute moves us. And I just want to be sure to thank the staff for the time and effort that went into producing the video. I'm looking at lights. Does anybody have a comment? Denise?
Thank you. I can't thank you enough for the time and effort that all of you took to put together this video, the thought that went into it, the idea just to have it. I can't thank you all enough. It is just beyond touching. Bernie had a real passion for children, for their welfare, and wanted things to go well for them as they developed into young adults and adults. He wanted their childhoods to be a foundation for them. And by helping the children, as the Juvenile Welfare Board does so well, it was a natural fit for him. He was so happy to be on this board, to join all of you and to help kids and their families and spend the dollars wisely to make their futures what the potential actually held for them. Thank you so much for all the work that you do on behalf of children in Pinellas County. As you know, when you help a child, you help their family. And the ripple effects go out to their families, the rest of the extended family, and to friends who are concerned about the children. So the work that you do to help every single child has such a great ripple effect on their families and their families' futures. It's just kind of exponential in what you do. So I thank you all for that. I want you to know that Bruce Bartlett helped Bernie immeasurably all these decades to do the things that he did. And Bernie was so lucky to have Bruce with him. Bruce will be on your board and serve on your board just as well as Bernie. And I'm so glad that he's here. Thank you, Bruce, for everything that you did for Bernie and for Pinellas County and Pasco County and our citizens. Thank you. And thank you. I'm so happy that you are taking Bernie's place. It is certainly what he wanted. And thank you all on the Juvenile Welfare Board again for this wonderful, beautiful tribute and for all the good work that you do for everybody here, and most especially the children in Pinellas County. Thank you all very much.
Now, as Bernie would want and Bob would want, let's get on with our agenda today. Can I call for a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented?
So move.
And a second, please? I see that back there with Mr. Ongst. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. We are going to alter the agenda this morning. Instead of moving directly to the action items, we are going to item 5A, which is the children's literacy update. We're putting that up on the agenda, and then we'll come back into the action items. So with that, I would introduce Judith Warren. Judith
right.
Warren to present the literacy update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to everyone. I wanted to really reflect a little bit before we started this presentation today and just say that Mr. McCabe was a big driver in us making sure that we just didn't deliver, any old literacy program, but that it was of highest quality and that we measured success and that we touched every child in the county. And, without him, I don't know that we would be where we are today. So I just really wanted to say that. And I'd like to send Denise a note as well to let her know. I'll introduce my co-presenter today, Patrick Pigeon. I think you've seen Patrick here before. He is going to take the podium. I'm going to stay here and we'll tag team a little bit. All right, so we're going to try and accomplish three things today. One, we are going to talk about outcomes of programming, and this is information on our first full year of literacy program, so you will see outcomes. Second, we'll go over some highlights that occurred over the first year. And third, we'll talk a little bit about the campaign for grade level reading. So again, outcomes, highlights, we'll focus in on the campaign. All right, so we do have some new board members, and I did want to kind of take us down memory lane, so to speak, and just show how we are where we are today. So in November of 2018, the board voted to dedicate $1,376,000 to high quality literacy programs. And then over the next months, we really took our time to engage Pinellas County Schools, to engage literacy experts, to engage the community, to really make sure that we got it right. And that was our goal. So the result was that in March of 2019, we took a proposal to the Finance Committee. And we had two really different tracks for this procurement that we were going to release. One, it was going to be programs for instruction and maintenance, and the other for outreach, giving books out, getting families connected to literacy resources. In April of 2019, we actually approved the RFP. And then in September, we awarded 4 organizations literacy contracts. And that was Y Reads, Boys and Girls Club, Shirley Proctor Puller, which were new to us, and our club conducted the outreach services. And then we looked at October through January as kind of our startup time. So by the way, we were just flying through. Everything was going smooth. And then March of 2020 hit, and we hit COVID. And now we are faced with some very unique challenges in service delivery. All right, next slide. All right, I'm not going to belabor this slide. You guys can all read it. The intent really is to say in a clear, concise way what we were looking for. So you will see on the far left, the contract names, then scope of work, and the outcomes that we agreed upon and brought to the board. I want to highlight that we really looked at an evidence-informed, evidence-based programming, that we did align our outcomes with what the school looks at for success in literacy. We did also really want to emphasize attendance. We know that dosage matters. If kids are attending, then they're going to do better. And when we look at literacy outreach, we wanted to make sure to align the programmatic pieces with the campaign for grade level reading, and also to target that high need population, those children that are in low opportunity. So again, scope of work and outcomes. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to Patrick, and he's going to walk us through some outputs, outcomes, and some highlights.
Thank you, Judith. I will provide more context on each slide for the outputs and outcomes that you see. Please feel free at any time to ask a question or just shout out, or we can do that at the end, whatever you're most comfortable with. So as you take a look at this slide, we're taking a look at, on the left side, the numbers served for our instruction and maintenance programs. Those represent 11 sites across 3 programs. For the Boys and Girls Clubs, we fund 3 sites to have the literacy instructional program. Y Reads, during fiscal year 20, we funded 7 sites, and the Shirley Proctor Puller Foundation is 1 site. As you can see across each site and overall, the need was targeted and met. Overall, 77% of all participants at program entry were evaluated to have been reading below grade level. And as you see across each of the 3 programs, that level of need was also targeted and met. And an important distinction here too, I think, is that we have 3 very distinct program models. So the Boys and Girls Clubs, we all know what those are. We all know what they do. They embedded this program within their pre-existing clubs. So it's very interesting, though their percentage of participants reading below grade level is lower than the other 2 programs. They weren't necessarily recruiting and though they could have been to some extent, they weren't necessarily recruiting and targeting children in need, because they are a Boys and Girls Clubs. They are a community-based after-school program. Conversely, you look at Y Reads, you look at Shirley Proctor Puller Foundation. Those are 2 programs that intentionally target children in need of these services. So that's why you would see kind of the gap in those rates. And as you look at the outreach, well, and then I'll just give a little bit more context really quick about the instruction and maintenance. So K-11 was served, but over 2/3 of all children served were K-3, just to give you some context there. And that kind of rate is true overall, but also true for each of those 3 programs. Most of their students served were in that K-3 range. So now, as we look to the outreach side, I would encourage you to look at the map that you have at your seats. It is a map of Pinellas County, layered initially with the Child Opportunity Index. And then layered on top of that, you will see 80 locations where our club's Read Strong outreach program held 130 events during fiscal year 20. So I'll just say that again really quickly. Those are 80 locations at which 130 events were held during fiscal year 20. Across those 130 events, plus an additional 87 engagements that Read Strong had in terms of kind of press junkets and radio spots and this superheroes program that we'll talk about later. They held 217 events in total. And across those events, they engaged 555 adults and 12,111 children. What's important to note here is that 56% of these events, and you can see this on the map because they will correspond with the areas that are more red, so low and very low opportunity. 56% of these events were held in neighborhoods that were identified as having very low or low opportunity. And kind of consistent with that, 64% of all the resources that were distributed through Read Strong was distributed within those very low and low opportunity neighborhoods. So that's a trend we like to see. It's not the same need as reading below grade level, but it is another need category that we're happy to see was targeted. Slightly more events were held in mid-county. At around 42% of these events were held in mid-county. Then North County, which was about 30, and then South County was around 28%. And the way that the books and the resources were distributed was kind of proportional to that as well. Interestingly, South County did account for more parent engagement. They accounted for about 41% of the parent engagement and about 59% of all of the referrals that were received through this program. And we'll get into that a little bit more in the outcomes. Next slide. So I'll just give you a moment to just kind of take this slide in. These are a lot of kind of concepts and reflections that were shared to us by these 4 programs during this COVID-19 period. You know, and we see this across a lot of our programs here at JWB, but I think something that we really want to highlight, especially for our 3 instructional programs, that there was this immediate pivot to not only the virtual instruction, which we knew was very important and something we're going to have to sustain, but they also really kind of heard the call to action and immediately were engaging their families, engaging their children, helping them connect to their schools, helping them get online and helping them bridge a lot of those important access gaps that they had. Most notably, we saw a lot of gaps with like technological hardware. So that's to say like a laptop or a tablet in the home, and also technological software. So the access to internet, particularly, you know, children who live in multiple households, who may reside over the course of any week or month, you know, with grandma and grandpa, with mom or dad. So these children who are highly mobile, if you will, trying to kind of equip them with this kind of this mobile, you know, set of resources so that they can stay engaged not only with their school but with their programs. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, so now we're at the outcomes. Start with the first one, which is, of course, well, across the board, as you just take a look at it, these are all very promising. And for both of the measures here, the target that these programs were attempting to meet was 75%. So for the first one, this is a program attendance measure, which is to say that during a program's time of enrollment, what percentage of these children attended at least 70% of program days. And as you look across all 3 programs, the numbers are fantastic. And again, I would just call, because as we look at these 3 programs side by side, we need to bear in mind that we are looking at 3 distinct programs. And so when you look at the boys and girls, well, that's just a whole different model. And I think 80%, not only during COVID, but just given just who they are as this kind of drop in, drop out, they have that quality where these other 2 programs don't. I think 80% is phenomenal. And just for a little further context there, the median attendance rate, right? So this is the rate at which students were attending 70% of program days. But the median attendance is, I think, even more impressive. So the Boys and Girls Club, the median attendance rate for all of their participants was 85%. For Y Reads, it was 91%. And for Shirley Proctor Puller Foundation, it was 91%. So more than that's to say that more than half of their students were still attending at a very, very high rate.
I just have a quick question.
Yes.
On the slide, because it differs from what we were sent. And so I just want to make sure what created that change. A good change, don't get me wrong, but it's
Sure.
a change. The one we received is under the maintenance or improvement reading levels at 6 months was 83%, 100%, and 96%. But what we have up here is relatively
That's a
different.
great question. And I will go through that right now.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So to your point, the one that you were sent was the contractual outcome. So those numbers, so both of these sets of numbers are valid and real. All right. So we could all, and I can take a deep breath. We didn't make an error. It's just, they're just different numbers. And it was a last minute change because before you also had two measures there. The previous one, we were stratifying our students. We were pulling out certain types of students. So the way that these programs, the way these outcomes are built, at program entry, a student is identified as either being at grade level or below. And then they're evaluated on particular outcomes accordingly. Given the nature of COVID, given the difficulties with testing, et cetera, what we thought was even a better statistic to show you is if we put every student together and showed you their progress on one consolidated measure. So what this measure is showing you is how many children of all across each program maintained or improved their reading level during their time within that program. The previous measure was only certain students, and I believe because it was maintained, those were just the students that entered program at grade level. So this now incorporates the students who are reading below grade level, and as we saw before, that's 77% of them. So the comparative that you can do here is you can look at that first set of numbers that accounts for about 23% of all of the participants. When you add in the remaining 77, this is the shift that you see, and that's the higher risk at need population. So we kind of agree that this was, though not the contractual measure, this was just the better, more telling one to show with you today, but I certainly apologize that we didn't get that to you initially. Sure. And just for some context on how we evaluated this, each program has a diagnostic tool that they use. So for Shirley Proctor Puller Foundation and Y Reads, they use iReady, and the Boys and Girls Club uses Let's Go Learn's diagnostic online reading assessment, which they call DORA. Each has a battery of subscales. For iReady, there's about 6 subscales. For DORA, there's 7, just factors of literacy development that the children are evaluated on, and they each then aggregate into a weighted score. And that weighted score is scaled to their grade level. So these children were viewed, in some cases, it was as brief as 3 months, again, just given the nature of how programming went this year. But most students were evaluated on a 6-month basis. So what these numbers are telling you is that 94% of Shirley Proctor Puller Foundation students from pre to post maintained or improved their reading level as indicated by the iReady. 93% of Y Read students the same, and then 85% of the Boys and Girls Club students from pre to post improved or maintained on DORA. Are there any questions with this slide before we move?
I have one quick
Yes.
question. So I understand those diagnostics, the separate ones, the iReady and the other. When you say maintain, if a student comes in 2 to 3 grade levels below in reading, I'm concerned that we're measuring the maintenance of that. Is that what, and you got me lost on that last explanation a little bit, but are we measuring that if we pre and post test, if a student's 2 or 3 grades below in reading, if that student made any gains or they maintained it? So 94% is a high percentage. I don't know how many of those students actually improved.
I don't have that
based on the treatment that
Sure.
you provided. The second question is that last year you said that you had, I think it was before everything's being measured pre and post COVID. but before COVID, you used the MAP assessments with this district. Do you have, based on the treatment, whether the students from September to December, where their MAP assessments were those improved significantly, not maintained, but improved? And then actually this year too, even though the learning environment's different, do you have the pre and post tests for the MAP assessments from September to December?
So I'll take those questions in reverse order. We are in the process of working with our MAP data now. That is something that I don't think we've done historically at JWB. So we can get that for you. To your first question, you are correct that if a child came in below grade, they are counted in this. And while it may have been, and we can get the data that would suggest, and we have it, we just don't have it on hand right now, to indicate how many did improve as opposed to maintained. What I think is even notable there, especially during COVID and the virtual environment, and this even accounts for the summer period where you see the summer slide, then we have this COVID slide. Maintaining, I think, is still important. These aren't children that are regressing during this really critical time. But I take the point, and we can certainly provide the statistics to show what percentage of students improved as opposed to just maintained.
The interesting thing, and it surprised me too, but the interesting thing about those who are studying this COVID slide is that the slide didn't happen to the degree that anyone anticipated in the areas of reading. It happened tremendously in the areas of mathematics. So reading is not across the nation, and even across the state of Florida, is not seeing that level of decrease. I think with or without COVID, the main objective of this literacy initiative is to take students who are struggling or below grade level and to provide them some treatment that we can ensure that over X number of months or years, hopefully not forever, that they're elevating and accelerating faster than their peers because they have something to catch up with. So instead of a year's worth of learning, they've got to make 1.6 years or 1.8 or 2. And that's where I think the analysis and the data needs to really reflect. Are we accelerating the struggling readers' learning to the point of by third grade, those readers will be on grade level as measured by? So I would really emphasize the use of whether iReady or MAP assessments. They're very readily available. We have all of those, and then use them with the analysis of whether we're accelerating the reading level of students. So we certainly don't want to. I understand your point about maintenance, and I don't differ with it. I think it's to maintain is okay, but the real emergency room care here is that the students are really below grade level, and maintenance is not good. Yeah, thanks for your time.
No, certainly, and as I said, we have that data, and we'll make sure that we get that to you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next slide. And again, I'll kind of give you a moment to take this slide in. This is in reference to our club's Read Strong outreach program. They launched in January, and of course, within, or shortly after the next 3 months, we were all thrust into COVID, and they really didn't slow down. They really didn't skip a beat. And in fact, they kind of turned it up a little bit with their partnerships, their collaborations. As I mentioned earlier, about 60% of all of their engagements were actual in-person events, which of course is very important. That's where a lot of these outputs come from. But what they ended up being able to achieve during the summer was, and now they are taking on independently, is a partnership, and I believe Judith will speak to this next, with the United Way, where they provided the Superheroes program, which is effectively a virtual reading tutoring arrangement between children who were seeking these types of support services. So we saw, that's close to 40% of all of their efforts during this year, with a lot of that coming kind of in the summer, July period, and then into September as well. So that was a positive development that we saw at the end of fiscal year 20. And further, their target, that the number 12,119, that's effectively the number of books that were distributed, that was very close to meeting their established target. It was about 82% of their established target for the year. So, you know, though the parent engagement number was significantly lower and the referrals were lower, it is of note to highlight the fact that they were still able to get these resources out throughout the community during this time. Are there any questions on this slide? Okay, well, I think with that, I will turn it back over to Judith.
All right, thank you, Patrick. All right, what you'll see here is just highlights of fiscal year 20 programming. Patrick alluded to the Read Strong Pinellas Superheroes program, and this was a book club that was created by our club. It encourages the children to read 20 minutes per day. They sign up, they are provided books, and then they enter their minutes in a reading log, and then they are eligible for incentives and prizes. And to date, we have 347 children that are signed up for this. I really want to kind of double down on the distribution of books with food. This was a sort of really difficult time to have any events or, you know, any sort of kind of place where kids could come and together to receive books. And our club really pivoted and they moved forward with having books and activities within their food packets. Also, the YMCA of Greater St. Pete provided a lot of support through their relief camps to children in the literacy space. And most exciting is that Shirley Proctor Puller did some reading with elders virtually during this time. Okay. Next slide. Yeah. All right, I'm going to shift us now to the campaign for grade level reading. At your desk, you should see a packet that gives an overview of key highlights of the campaign. The campaign lists the 2025 goals, major efforts, and campaign reach. And the vision of the campaign is that all Pinellas County children will be reading at grade level by the end of 3rd grade. We're at the 7th year of our campaign. It feels like only yesterday, but it's 7 years. We now have 85 organizations and 175 individuals that are a part of the campaign. We have some sort of signature projects that we take on. One is an attendance awareness. We do book distribution throughout the summer. We work with Myon, which is a digital literacy platform where kids can read. And we work with them to support our overarching goals. This year, we are a partner in the Raising Anti-Racist Babies project that's led by the entity called Thrive by 5. Children are provided books from ages 2 to 5 that center around Black culture and racial diversity. And parents are giving talking points and tools to engage their children in discussions around race and racism. And there's also local community influencers that are participating in virtual read alouds. We have a training subgroup that partners with Pinellas County Schools to really raise up any training opportunities. Our current focus really is to see in the community more intensive reading programs, which is a good segue to our next slide. All right, so we've been working with the Electio Institute for 5 years, and Electio is a Harvard-based institute. Their complete focus is building a strong literacy continuum of care within the communities. So far, I believe we've had 173 organizations participate in what we'll call the Electio Institute workshop. And that's a 3-day workshop that really calls for the provider to kind of dig in, look at what they're doing in the literacy space. Can they improve, or do they want to shift their model to something different? And out of that, this tool, this mapping tool arose for us to really look at Pinellas County and where we are. So if you look at the far left, that's really in the space of raising awareness. So those are the programs that are in raising awareness. And on the far right, as we move through it, the 20 programs are those that are in intensive literacy services. So what I want to say, and you'll see this at the next board meeting, is we really want to grow that intensive learning space, that 20 programs. We want to grow and develop more capacity for our children because, as you said, Dr. Grego, we really have a high need and we want to be sure to be able to link these children to services. All right, I think we have a quick testimonial at the end and then we will take questions.
In the words of Frederick Douglass, once you can read, you will be forever free. When COVID hit, we had an opportunity to partner with organizations like Read Strong and new programs like Antonio Brown and his community barbershop book club. We know that we are stronger together. And I really want to thank the folks at JWB for helping us restore that legacy of literacy for our scholars going forward into the future. In the words of Frederick Douglass.
All right, any additional questions?
Yeah, if I may. Yeah, thank you so much for presenting this, and it's a lot of very good, useful information. And I thank you also for the partnership with our school district. I guess, and I don't want this to sound critical, I want us to challenge ourselves to really take a look at the charge ahead of us and the charge, and I view this whole atmosphere as not a reason why we can't, but a reason why we can, and to truly pivot and to succeed in, for once and for all, getting more and more children on grade level. Some of these programs and these things, as you mentioned, Judith, are 7 years and 5 years. I know in my business, if I did something for 7 years and I'm not seeing something move, I start to really seriously question not that they're bad, but they're not getting us the intended results. In this community, I know that you presented a case where you had 715 students. There are probably over 14,000 or 15,000, which is truly our targeted N. And so I just want to say that we collectively, this is myself included, we really need to huddle and say, how do we truly get grade level reading and understand that the third grade FSA is a comprehensive reading exam. It's not whether students can or cannot read. So the access to books with Mayan and others is great. But we need to bring this whole thing to a different level so that we're impacting literally 20,000 plus students of grade levels. Because if we're taking a look at the legitimacy and the quality of VPK programs, kindergarten programs, first, second, third, and we're talking about we're over 30,000 students in this community. And so even in those that we could use as a gauge, I always say, look, the state proficiency rate is at 54 or 55. We're at 56. It's nothing to raise the flag on. It's no one's bragging, but it's designed to be that way. It's designed at the state cutoff that you're never going to get to 100%. So they're always going to raise the bar, but we ought to continue to raise the bar also in this community. So. I guess what I'm saying is that our population is this big. I think we're shooting for this big, and we need to really expand our goals and aspirations so that if we truly, I go back to the original goal, which I very much appreciate Beth and others to say we want every student on grade level. Well, then we need to look at what every student means and count them, every student. And say, what is it that we're going to do that scale up in this community that the 5 years or 6 years or 7 years, we're at every student, or at least the growth is so significant that we know we're making progress and we're on the right track. throughout the state, and I deal with this throughout the state, we haven't done that. And there's a greater attention, by the way, at the state level now to turn our attention back to literacy and early literacy. Finally, after years of somewhat neglect and at the state level and others, but it doesn't mean we have to. So this is exciting work, and we have assessments. We have enough assessments to choke a cow. We just need the implementation and the strategies, and children have access, but we need the instruction and the great instruction. So I know this board stands real firm behind this initiative. It's a bold initiative, and it's one that's going to take hopefully not too long, but it's one that will take much longer than just a year or two. But I think we all need to be convinced that we're on the right path and the strategy to accomplish it in the given time that we have. But thanks for allowing me to make some comments.
No, I just wanted to comment, and thank you for your support and for your comments. After a year of being able to evaluate these programs, particularly the deeper end programs, we're convinced that they are on the right track, but we also know organizations have only so much ability to scale up. And so we have talked to each of the three about what it is they believe they can do. And you'll see at the next board meeting proposals from them that would more than double what you saw on the screen here, that they believe they could do. Most of those would start with next school year because they're out of school programs. One of them would start in the summer. But, you know, I always wish we could move faster and broader, but I do think we're going in the right direction. Thank you. Jarek?
Given what both of you have said, this COVID has been a complete disaster in a lot of ways, but it could be a good saving in this one. What I think I've heard is, and I not what I heard, what I've seen is that, yeah, we've made some progress, but probably not enough. Nowhere near what we want to or need to. And I've seen where the school system has done a lot of good work in this area. I just happened because of my grandkids that I can see the impact that reading has had and where they're headed, and the programs that are built within the classrooms to support that. What I'm asking the staff to do is, you know, it's time to reevaluate a lot of what we have. While you've got this during the period between now and early next year when we expect to make the real changes. But we really got to look at, one, how to better integrate with the school systems and what they're doing, how to reassess whether or not the programs that we've had for 7 years are still the right ones to valid and take us to the next level, not just get us where we're maintaining. And then I think equally, if not more important, is that we've got to look at really what's the real impact of the real drivers here that are creating the situation that we're in. You know, we've seen early child development, where what we've learned during that process is that if a child's not getting the kinds of needed, impacted messaging and care, that leaves a big gap. And then the potential for that to impact what we're trying to help support here can be even as big, if not greater. So how do we integrate all these bits and all these pieces of programs together to ensure that we're not just trying to maintain what's happening out there, but that we're clearly impacting the change that needs to be in effect, so that we'll spend less time in maintenance and more time in adding value to their future in the earlier stages or along the way. We're going to have to figure out a program for those that we can't get to now that may have been impacted, and we can work through, we'll have to work through that. But I think we now have really the opportunity to look at it very differently, very non-traditionally, outside of the box. COVID's allowed us to do that, to create out the side of the box thinking. And I think it's now time that we put aside, wrong words. We set aside any of the thinkings of the past and look at the future and how we can better impact it with all the knowledge and the information that we have today, and then make the changes that are necessary to drive this difference. And it's got to be collectively. It can't be JWB try to do something that's different than what Mike in the school system are doing, or any of the other organizations. We see a lot of different tools that are out there that different people are using. Are they compatible? Do they really give us the same message through each of them? I think we got to understand all that, so that what measurements we're using are apples to apples comparisons, and what impacts and changes we make in this overall programs are going to make a difference, and that we can clearly monitor and measure that difference change right in the start and as we move forward. I hate to say this, and I'm going to say it anyway. I don't want to wait 7 more years, because who knows if I'll even be here 7 more years. But I don't want to wait 7 more years to find out that we're kind of a little better than we were. Right? It's time now for us to really hone in on and focus in on and make a major impact in this area. Whether we lead the state in it, I'd love to see it. If we don't, doesn't really matter. It's what's most important to our children here in this community. They get that value-added opportunity for learning, reading, math, all the components that are necessary for them just to become very successful in their lives going forward. So I'm going to challenge you to really get out there and tear this apart. While you got the chance between now and then, look at the different pieces. If organizations need to expand, I will tell you that in the beginning, and I'll use that as my example. Shirley Proctor, thought they had a great program, but I didn't think they could do much more than where they are. What they've shown in these numbers, they've done a lot of things that I probably would never have thought they could have, because of the size of where they were. Let's leverage that. Let's look at how do we better that and use those, so that type of thinking and expanded vision going forward for our kids in the future.
All right, as we wind down this conversation, I just want to come back and ask the staff to come back to that outcomes page and break those stats down to maintenance, improved. And if you can do it by which children were under grade level, which were at grade level, it seems to me that if we're crunching the numbers and working on the data, let's bring that and make that a much more comprehensive piece of information for us. We'll come back with that. Okay,
And
Dr. Grego?
I would be happy to help with the MAP assessments. So those are the most predictive. And I don't know, I'll throw this suggestion out, and you might already be connected to it, but Just Read Florida is a clearinghouse of the most research-based, along with assessments. They center themselves out of Florida State, but they're a tremendous resource. You have, 85 or so programs. And to Mike's point, I think we don't want to waste time to determine whether programs, they've done the research, and these are nationally research reading programs, and a wealth of information there. Just Read Florida. I don't know if you use them, but they're open, and certainly would encourage you to get connected with them, and we are too. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Judith. Thank you, Patrick. For those of you that are viewing on Zoom, we're going back to the agenda. Action items, which is 4A, which is to approve our FY20 audited financial statements. And our presentation, I guess, Laura, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce our auditor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So as you're aware, we have completed the audit for fiscal year 2020. And our auditors were present at the Finance Committee meeting and prepared a presentation. And they are here with us this morning. So with us, we have the audit partner, John Gibraltar from the Tampa office, as well as the audit manager on the engagement, Victoria Bean, and they will provide their required communications that they need to address. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, and good morning. Thank you for letting us be here today. My name is John Gilberto. I'm a partner with Sherry Becker, and I oversaw the external audit this year. We want to thank the Finance Committee. About a couple of weeks ago, we went through full detail of our audit process procedures, the timing, nature, and extent of what happened during the audit. And they asked a lot of good questions, and we had a lot of good conversation. So today we're here to give you a high-level summary of the results of the audit. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Victoria Bean, and she's going to give you just a very quick presentation on the results, what the final results of our audit were.
Good morning, and thank you for having us here today. As John mentioned, my name is Victoria, and I was the manager on this account. We have completed our audit work over the audit for the Juvenile Welfare Board related to September 30th, 2020, and we have a few deliverables that we'll be going over for you today. If you could go to the next slide. Thank you. So our first deliverable is going to be, of course, the audit opinion. And what this is we performed our audit under the generally accepted auditing standards, as well as the government auditing standards. Excuse me. And we did determine that the generally accepted accounting principles applied by management and the Juvenile Welfare Board were appropriate, and there were no material misstatements. We will be issuing a clean opinion, which is now known as an unmodified opinion and was previously known as an unqualified opinion. This is, of course, the only opinion that you really want to receive on your audit. I did want to draw your attention to a new part of our audit opinion this year, and that's going to be an emphasis of matter paragraph. You will see this on pretty much every financial statement and audit opinion issued this year. It directs the reader's attention to a footnote where we discuss the uncertainties related to COVID-19. This does not affect our unmodified opinion on the Juvenile Welfare Board, but we did just want to state that we really don't know what's going to happen and what the impact will be in the coming years. We will also issue a report on internal control over financial reporting and compliance, and we would be required to report any material weaknesses in controls or non-compliance matters. We will be issuing this letter with no comments. As required by the Auditor General of Florida, we will be issuing a management letter. And again, if there were any material issues or problems that we had during the audit, we would be required to communicate those to you. We will be issuing with no comments. And finally, last but not least, we will be issuing a report on compliance with local investment policies under Florida Statute 218-415, and we will be issuing an unmodified opinion on this as well. If you could go to the next slide. So this is our contact information, and John and I are available all year round. We do serve on behalf of the board, not just during our audit time and audit procedures. So if you have a question throughout the year, something comes up that you want to discuss, please reach out. We don't charge for phone calls, and we're here to help you in any way that we can. And I believe we'll open the floor for questions or comments if you guys have any.
Thank you. We appreciate you coming again today. And Madam Chair, if we have any questions from the board members?
Yes, could you just please, at the Finance Committee meeting, we spoke even in a closed session. In the closed session, there was very little to talk about, if anything. But there was an award that our team had won. Could you please let the rest of the board members know or understand the award and what its real value is?
Yes, excellent point. So last year, JWB went out and they tried to get their certificate from the Government Finance Officers Association for excellence in financial reporting. What this means is there's a lot of criteria for fair disclosure and the way that your financial statements are set up. So your financial statements are set up a little bit differently this year or last year than they were the years before. There will be 3 defined sections in there. There's the introductory section, which has a transmittal letter. It has your beautiful pictures, and it will have the certificate of excellence, which you did receive on last year's financial statements. That certificate says that your financial statements are at the highest level of financial reporting that is out there for a governmental entity. It is reviewed by your peers. So when you send your financial statements in, your comprehensive annual financial report into the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, they send it out to reviewers. I've been a reviewer. There's a lot of people in my office that have been reviewers, and a lot of people from all the other governments across the United States are reviewers. So your financial statement goes out to a group of reviewers. They review it for a checklist of fair disclosures to make sure that all your disclosures are at the highest level, and and your report is very clean, concise, and it goes through all the required documentation. And with that, you are a first-time recipient of the award from the GFOA for excellence in financial reporting. And that's not a high percentage to get it the first time. So your staff has to be congratulated on their ability to put together such a fine report to be able to receive their certificate on their first attempt.
Thank you. And I'd once again like to congratulate our staff for a job well done.
Thank you. Thank you. Madam Chair, I believe we need a motion. to
And
approve.
I would assume at this point, we've had a thorough presentation at the finance meeting, a high-level summary today, so I'll call for a motion.
So moved.
And a second, I heard that, Mr. Ongst, and all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This motion carries. Thank you so much. I want to point out the person standing just at the door, Leslie LaFleur, who more than anyone deserves kudos for this award.
Right, and at the Finance Committee meeting, she did receive a plaque that Brian Ongst presented, so we were very happy that we were able to recognize her and the entire Finance Department team.
Thank you very much. Okay, action item B, ratify the Finance Committee recommendations for February 24th. And I believe that will be specifically to approve the participant management software request for proposals. So Laura, I'll turn that back over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So at the February 24th, 21 Finance Committee meeting, the committee took the action to approve the participant management software request. And we are seeking approval for that award and to negotiate an agreement with Social Solutions Global, Inc. For this participant management software. The agreement will be for an initial contract term of 5 years in the amount of $655,575 with option of additional successive terms. And just to remind you that we had been using Mosaic for the last several years, and we decided we wanted to get a different software system, and we were unable to find one to accomplish both of those needs. So we've already implemented just this week the grants management software that we acquired, which handles the financial side. And this award that we would contract would be on the participant management side, which is the evaluation side. So Social Solutions was selected as the highest ranked firm by our evaluation committee and is also recommended by the Finance Committee. And so I'll turn it back to Madam Chair, who's left the room.
Madam Chair had to step out for a call, I believe. So let me take it from here. Is there any questions or comments concerning this?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve in a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those same sign. It's approved.
Action item C, which is to approve. Oh, B2. I thought we moved on to the ratification. Okay. Uh-huh. So we are action item C to approve the proposed JWB legislative and public policy consensus agenda. Deb Pruitt, you are ready at the podium.
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me? Very good. Thank you very much. It's great to be here and see you all in person. So what we have for you today is something very different than we've done before. And I'm going to kind of explain that along the way as I go. There will be a slide that will represent what staff is asking to be our public policy and legislative consent platform. Different from priorities, different from agenda. And that's primarily for some of the discussion that you've had this morning. We are in such different times. We know what needs to be done. We just don't know when and how that opportunity will present itself. So with that, we will move forward. So early in the pandemic, what started out as daily, which ended up being hourly and sometimes 3 and 4 times an hour, were calls to action in a variety of scenarios to assist families in need as we experienced a lockdown and some immediate loss in jobs. At that time in the summertime, a couple months into the pandemic, the Feeding America entity estimated that 50 million people could could face food insecurity by the end of 2020. In Pinellas County, that's about 162,500 people. Pandemic electronic benefit transfers were initiated to assist families whose children couldn't go to school, who were on free and reduced lunch and could no longer access those services. The irony of pandemic EBT is that it was actually created during H1N1. It was never funded, it was never utilized, it wasn't needed, but it actually existed in federal law, which gave the federal government the opportunity to fund it rather quickly. Child care centers closed and impacted parents with the ability to work. Many weren't eligible for unemployment. Some experienced delays in receiving unemployment benefits. Some folks have never ever received unemployment at all. And then states enacted temporary bans on rental and mortgage eviction via governor's executive orders. And then the CDC issued their temporary ban that ended up being what's in place today. So all that to say that we don't know what to expect moving forward, but we do know where JWB spends a greater part of its investment and where our focus areas lead us. So this is what staff is presenting to you as a legislative and public policy agenda for 2021 in the areas of early childhood and school readiness and in school nutrition and insecurity. And what we're putting forward are areas that we believe will truly impact and benefit the larger systems that help families who are at risk. Financial assistance for the child care industry and Head Start providers in danger of closing. The various stimulus packages have offered money in smaller amounts than the industry and child advocates think is necessary. Those are incremental dollars that are coming out. They're very temporary, they're time limited. Enhancements in quality early learning curriculum, particularly in 0 to 3. It's a nod to Dr. Morrison Rodriguez, because those are the years when that matters. And again, we know what's needed, we just don't know how or when those opportunities will roll out. Looking to modernize child care subsidy formulas to assist low-income families and provide market rate to those who are providing child care services. And then something that we would want for all children, but certainly children in low-income communities, because of what's being referred to as this COVID-19 gap year in pre-kindergarten, would be to look for full day paid pre-kindergarten for those families. As we shift to child nutrition and food insecurity, the modernization of the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, known as food stamps, and I'm going to show you a slide in a minute to expand on that. Modernize policies to purchase prepared meals from grocery store delis and restaurants, and convert the pandemic EBT that we're currently using now into something we're calling the Children's Nutrition EBT that will assist with summer and school break meals. It will reduce the dependence on break spots, food banks, and pantries, which we learned during COVID. Having people go to places to pick up food just wasn't a smart way to do that distribution. Empowering them with a specific card that would have those dollars on it would make it a lot more direct and a lot more simple. What the pandemic exposed really is why families are on the edge. And the reason that families fell over the cliff is due to antiquated eligibility formulas.
If I could go back just one.
Yes.
Just for clarity, this is the page that we want to ask the board to approve. If you are comfortable with it, if you're not, we can tweak it and move forward. Deb has a lot of other information, background information and broader information to provide, but this would be the piece out of all of the presentation that we would want to ask for board approval, giving me then the more flexible ability to make a phone call to a legislator, sign on a letter, do what's necessary, and those never seem to align perfectly with board meetings. So at this point, do we want to take a pause and vote, or let's go through the rest of the information just to see if Deb has any other backup information to come back and vote with more information.
Sure.
So go ahead.
Sure. So not knowing if there was going to be another stimulus package or a recovery plan, Senate Bill 220, Emergency Family Stabilization Act, was filed when the new Congress convened. And this provides some unique assistance, health, safety, housing, and education for very at-risk populations, children with disabilities, pregnant and parenting youth, children under 6, pregnant women. It's going to provide some flexibility in the areas of funding for local providers like the Homeless Leadership Alliance of Pinellas in terms of a more comprehensive definition of homelessness and allow them to use their funds in a different way. That bill is still currently open and available. So again, looking for more longer term solutions rather than just stimulus packages and rather than just temporary time limited fixes. These are truly solutions. As it relates to SNAP, the Food Stamp Act was created in 1964. And the eligibility is based on something called the Thrifty Food Plan, which we all know in today's world, there's really no such thing as thrifty food. The increase in costs in food have happened over the last few years. The SNAP benefits are based on this plan. It was actually created, the calculation method was created in the 1970s. And while it's received some incremental increases over the years, that 1970s calculation method is way out of date. And I had to challenge myself on, what was happening in the 1970s. The loaf of bread was 25 cents. Eggs were 60 cents a dozen. Milk was $1.32 a gallon. And a stamp was 6 cents. Gas was 36 cents a gallon. And so as you can see, that method, that calculation method, is woefully out of date. Currently, SNAP recipients on an average in Florida, household average of SNAP recipient dollars is $232. So the stimulus packages have allowed for a 15% increase on that amount. But again, the calculation method is based on a 1970s calculation. An individual on SNAP would receive around $133 per month. Temporary assistance for needy families was created in 1996 as part of the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act. It replaced the aid for dependent families. Some of us in this room remember AFDC that provided cash assistance to families. It requires states to provide a local match effort or maintenance of effort. But the TANF block grant funding remains at the same level as it was in 1996. It's funded on a federal level at $16.5 billion. And the real value of that funding has been reduced by 40% when you factor in inflation. In the state of Florida, an average family of 3 at 185% of poverty receives $303 per month on TANF. And they can only be on that program for a maximum of 48 months. The average family rolls off of that program within 2 to 2.5 years. And they have to be seeking for work and accepting employment. What we've experienced recently with jobs is what's being referred to as the she session. 3 million women have dropped out of the labor force as a result of childcare closures and school closures. Many of them held essential jobs that required them to be in person in their job and made it impossible for them to work from home. On a worldwide basis, 47 million women have fallen into poverty, and that's equal to the size of the country of Spain. This is another piece of federal legislation that was actually included in the most recent stimulus package. This will now give special districts the opportunity, unfortunately, not to receive direct allocation. It will have to come through a state, a county, or a city allocation, but special districts will now be able to receive federal stimulus and relief money as included as a local government with those other levels of government. And that was not the case in the previous stimulus bills.
It's too soon, I suspect, for you to have any information about how we apply, or is the money just allocated, or?
We wouldn't apply if a state, county, or city received the stimulus dollars. They could then
Allocate
dedicate
it.
them, they could allocate them to us.
That's what I read, so thank you.
Yes. Just to give you a glimpse of what's happening early in the legislative session, which started last week. There are two pieces of legislation in the space that JWB is involved in. The first being House Bill 419, Early Learning and Early Grade Success. This is its third year, I believe, at least its second year. It's going to establish the Division of Early Learning within the Department of Education. It's going to repeal the Child Care and Executive Partnership and establish the Council for Early Grade Success. And it will revise the composition of early learning coalitions, make them subject to State Board of Education oversight. It's going to phase in new VPK accountability system to include outcomes and learning gains. It will not include a letter grade for VPK providers, which was the inclusion in last year's bill that caused it essentially not to pass. The other piece of legislation out there is House Bill 3, the home book delivery for elementary students. This is one of Speaker Sprawl's initiatives. It's going to create the New Worlds Reading Initiative. K through 5th grade students with reading deficiencies will be eligible. The Department of Education will provide 50% of the funding, and the school districts will be required to fund 50% with partners. One book will be mailed to students each month, and students will have an opportunity to indicate their preference, and there will be training for parents with materials for home reading skills and enhancements. They plan on working through the library system. And to Dr. Grego's point earlier, House Bill 7011 was unveiled, I think it was last week, I lose track, as a proposed committee bill. It is going to be a literacy initiative that's going to increase teachers' reading endorsements. It's going to have a full-scale reading system from K through 8, and it will provide a transition from pre-K to kindergarten.
I was going to ask if Dr. Grego had any comments on HB 419.
I certainly support it.
Yeah.
Yeah, 419, it's long overdue. There's been very little accountability systems for the billions of dollars we've spent as a state on VPK programs. And yes, we all understand that the VPK is underfunded, but the structure that's needed to really be a leading state in the nation on early childhood is much of the conversation that we had earlier, not to repeat it. It just needs some accountability structure and systems around it so that we could see that growth, and we students then can take off from grades, well, not grades, but 4-year-olds could be better prepared. So yeah, and Speaker Sprouls and I have spoken. This House Bill 3 is something that is his issue, and we will continue to work with it. I'm working with the company, and I think actually right now there was such kind of pushback on it's not the DOE, I think it'd be the state that would be funding this, and I think the state's funding 100% now, I think with some partners. So that'll change before the end of the session, but a lot of emphasis on literacy, and as I've said, and I think others, my colleagues here, this is a good time to really use it to our advantage.
And I think it's worth noting that a number of the elements of HB3 we have here
Right,
in Pinellas
right,
County, funded by the JWB, but they are not in all the counties in the state.
Okay, what,
So I've asked Shannon to take us back to this consensus. It says agenda, it should say platform. Agenda was how I started this. That was terminology pre-COVID. Moving forward, we're calling it a platform. And as I said at the beginning, we know what should be done. We just don't know how the opportunities will present themselves, and we certainly don't know when. So what we are asking as staff and on behalf of our CEO is to give some latitude for her to weigh in on those opportunities as they present themselves. And they won't necessarily be legislation only. They could be a call for comments on programs and services and how things happened and didn't happen during COVID, and really and truly more about the recovery of COVID and what needs to change. I think that was discussed today, Mr. McCurrack. You talked about that quite a lot.
okay,
Rules
Dr.
promulgation is another opportunity for weighing in on changes that don't even require legislation if we have that opportunity. And those come very quickly. There's like a 2-week turnaround time. It won't coincide with the board meeting because they never have, and they certainly won't now.
So I'll move to approve the consensus agenda.
Thank you. And a second? We have a second. All in favor? Any opposed? This motion carries. All right, we're moving to presentation, item 5B, the update on school readiness data and the dashboard. And I think Judith has a partner in Chin to make this presentation.
Correct. Dr. Chen Fan will be presenting.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Chen Fan. I'm the senior researcher at the JWB, focusing on school readiness focus area, or now we use the name result area. And last summer, JWB CEO, Ms. Beth Hilton, presented to the board the JWB dashboard. The board asked some questions about the measures and the outcomes. In response to the board questions, JWB staff created this presentation. I'm going to present to you the data and the analysis of the fiscal year 2020 school readiness participants. I will use the data and try to answer your questions on who are the children JWB school readiness programs serve, and how do they compare to other children in the Pinellas County, and what are their school readiness outcomes, and the most important question, are we making a difference? So these slides provide you, hold on, sorry, I used the wrong slide. I lost that one, okay. So JWB School Readiness Result Area has 16 programs serving preschool children ages 0 to 5. For this presentation, all the data and the analysis is focused on the 5-year-old children who graduated from the school readiness programs and entered into kindergarten. And you can see from the chart, I tried to have a better understanding of this cohort of the children. So I matched all school readiness children's data to the Pinellas County kindergarten data. And from the data, 11% of the children enrolled at the Pinellas County schools were served by JWB school readiness programs in fiscal year 2020. Of this cohort of the JWB participants, students, 19% of them attended one of the 11 early learning centers funded by JWB. And 25% of those children received some supportive services. Here, the supportive services are could be behavioral intervention services or developmental intervention services or early literacy home visiting services. And a large amount of children, 57% of children, received child care subsidies through RAP care or match care. And the JWB provides match care funding, match funding to Early Learning Coalition to help the low-income working families with child care. And the JWB also provides RAP care funding to big PK students. So those children can extend their hours. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me clearly? So those children can extend their hours and stay for full day care. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, and this slide provides you the comparison between the JWB children and the Pinellas County kindergarteners. And as you can see from the left side, and in comparison with Pinellas County kindergarteners, JWB served a more diverse, racially diverse population. The Black population, the percentage, it almost doubled. And on the right, that's some indicators used by the school system. Those the free reduced lunch is always used as an indicator for low socioeconomic status. You can see from the chart, 84% of the children received free or reduced lunch at a school. And exceptionality is another indicator used by the school system. And here the exceptionality includes the physical disability or learning disability or behavioral or emotional disability, or sometimes that's health problems. And 14% of the children received JWB school readiness services were identified by the school system with some kind of exceptionality. And so all those factors, low, free reduced lunch and exceptionality and limited English proficiency, they all have negative impact on the children's school performance. Next slide. And I also matched all children's data to the Child Opportunity Index. And this is a new measure used by JWB. And the Child Opportunity Index is an index designed to measure child opportunity at the census tract level. And it's an index combined with 24 indicators in 3 domains. As education, health, and the environment, or socioeconomic status. And you can see from the chart, and 80% of the children JWB served had a moderate to very low child opportunity index. It's like 8 out of 10 children had a moderate to very low child opportunity index. And you may ask, so what does the low, very low child opportunity index mean? I will take our preschool children as an example. So if you have very low opportunity index, that means you may not have an early learning center in your neighborhood within 1.5 miles. And even if there's a child early learning center, and that is not a quality early learning center. And you may not have a park to play in your neighborhood. And your parent has low education level, and your family live under poverty, and you live with a single parent, so on. So a lot of indicators. But the census tract data echoes with what we found from the system. JWB serves the most vulnerable and at-risk population in our community. So we are targeting the right population. Next slide. And now with all those things take into consideration, you may ask, so how are those children doing at school? And how do we assess them? And are they ready for kindergarten? And in Florida, every child enter into kindergarten, public schools, and they have to be screened. And this is mandated by the state. And the Florida Department of Education, they selected the instrument tool to assess the children if they are ready for kindergarten. We call this Florida Kindergarten Readiness Screener, FLICRS. So next time when I use FLICRS, you know, that's the school readiness or kindergarten readiness test. And since 2017, a new tool, STAR Early Literacy, has been used as the instrument tool to assess the FLICR school readiness rate. And the STAR Early Literacy is an adaptive assessment. It assesses children's early literacy and early numeracy skills. And here you may ask, what does adaptive assessment mean? That means the children are taking the test on computer, and the test difficulty level can be adjusted based on how well the child answers the previous question. For example, if the child answers the previous question correctly, the next question may be at a more difficult level. And if the child failed to answer the previous question correctly, and the child may have an easier question to answer. So this is a test assessment used by the state. And the JWB also used that. Next slide. And this slide, I gives you all children's school readiness outcome in the last 4 years. Let's first look at the far right, the 2020. If you look at the blue bar, 50%. So that's the school readiness rate for this cohort of children we just reviewed. So take into the mind, they are vulnerable. They have the disadvantages. And remember, we had 14% of the children, they had exceptionality. And I look at their exceptionality. So I compared the children with exceptionality and without exceptionality. And for the children without exceptionality, their school readiness rate was 54%. But for the children with exceptionality, their school readiness rate dropped to 27%. It's like just chopped from half. And so all those disadvantages we reviewed, and they had an impact on children's school readiness result. So when we compare that to the county and to Florida, we see, yes, we have a low score, but not too far off. So our children didn't do so bad. And if we look at the previous year's trend data, and for JWB kids, and from 17 to 18, we saw 1% increase. And 19, we saw another 1% increase. And this year, due to the COVID slide, and it's back to 50. But it was still pretty stable around 50%. And also not too far from when we compare to the county and to the state. Next slide. And so based on all the information we talked about, this is the updated school readiness dashboard. So we are going to use one measure, the FLICR school readiness assessment, to track all children's performance for this school readiness focus area. And so we also added the new outcome, the fiscal year 20 outcome to this dashboard. And next slide. Okay, now you may ask me, okay, you reviewed all those things. We know we are serving the vulnerable population and our children have disadvantages. And they didn't do too bad compared to the county and the state. But what is the role of JWB? Did we make a difference? So this chart gives you a, I look at the relationship between the length of service JWB school readiness programs provided to those children and the children's kindergarten readiness rate. So you can see from that line, and when children were served within 30 days, their school readiness rate was 38%. But then when it's 1 year, within 1 year, and that's 51%. And when it's more than 1 year, between 2 years, that's 53%. And when it's above 2 years, it's like a magic wand and 100%. Here I want to warn you, and for this chart and for children above 2 years, we do not have many children in this group. So the chart may be skewed, but for the most children crowded in from 1 day to 2 years, and this trend is clear. So there's some improvement, slowly but surely. And so based on the data, I think we do make a difference to our children through our early learning services. We want to keep our children in our services and to help them to help them to bridge the gap and help them overcome all those challenges or disadvantages they have experienced in their life, start early. So next slide. And this last slide, and JWB Chief Evaluation and Innovation Officer, Dr. Morrison Rodriguez would like to talk about that.
Thank you, Chen. As I come into JWB, I'm getting acquainted with all the data sets and the various analyses that we've been doing. One of the ones that really struck me was, and Dr. Grego spoke to this, that in the area of reading readiness, we're kind of stuck at that kind of 50% level. The other piece of data that astonishes me is I saw a chart where that proficiency actually drops the longer students are in grades. So when you get up to grade 4 and 5, the percentage of children who are on grade reading level declines even further than the 50%. So it's not going, it's as you go up, it's going like this. So yeah, we've got some very serious issues around literacy, but I have a couple of comments that I want to make. First of all, I think it's important to go back to the fact that JWB serves 11% of the children. This is a 100% problem, and JWB is helping with 11% of it. I think it's important to keep that parameter in mind. Also, as Dr. Fan pointed out, our children come with higher disabilities. You would expect their performance to be even less. Not that 50% is good, but I would expect it to be even less. So we are keeping them closer to the norm than they might be otherwise. The other thing that intrigued me was this 90% aspirational goal, and I didn't know where it came from, but it first of all, I wasn't sure where it came from and within what time period it was expected to be achieved. So it was helpful to learn that A, it was an aspirational goal. It is an aspirational goal over 5 years, which coincides with the strategic planning timeline for JWB. So if we internalize this aspirational goal, We would hope to see 90% of our children, of that 11%, be proficient in reading at the end of our strategic planning period. And so I asked if a chart could be developed, which might suggest what that trend line would look like. And it would be between now and then that we would have as an operational goal, a measurable goal, a 10% increase per year in order to get us up to that 90%. I think it makes it more reasonable for us. It makes it more reasonable for our reading providers because we're not expecting them to go in 1 year from 50 to 90. But if we could have it in a graduated increase of 10% per year. The caveat of that is COVID. What we may actually find is that our baseline rate of around 50% may now be down to 40 with COVID slide. And so we've got a deeper hole to climb out of, so to speak. But I think we have to look at that data and see what it looks like. But this notion of 10% increments per year, I think is more reasonable and potentially doable, both as a set of expectations and us being able to deliver on that. But I really wanted to particularly give you and suggested that we look at that demographic profile so you can understand the challenging population that we deal with. And I think, and I mentioned to Judith, I would like to see, for example, an analysis that compares the children in Pinellas County who are in free and reduced lunch to our children who are on free and reduced lunch. That would tell us if we're making an incremental difference for children with similar degrees of difficulty or challenge. So we're going to try to pull that data together and take a look at that. But those are the only comments I wanted to make on this. It's overall discouraging, but I think there are some signs that we are getting there slowly. And just to say that we are a player in this, but this is a challenge for Pinellas County schools overall. It is a challenge for the state of Florida overall. And JWB is doing what it can within its 11% touch. I think that really needs to be kept in mind.
I'm going to, Commissioner Seal and then Mr. McClure.
So looking at the last chart, where it goes from 1 to 2 years to 3 years and it jumps to 100%, how many children are we talking about? And is it because they're in early learning centers or what's the correlation?
Yeah. I'll let Chin speak to that. I'm not sure we know. Those numbers up at 100% we talked about yesterday, they're small. The numbers who've been in for that number of years are small. What it does suggest, though, is that dosage matters. And the longer we have the children, the better they do. I think we need larger numbers on that tail at the end. We want to see more children stay with us for that long.
But are they in the early learning centers? Is that where the success metric is happening?
Chen, do you know the answer?
I mean, I would think it would be.
They're in the early learner centers.
I needed to go back to look at the data if that's the early learning center attendees. Yeah, I'll get back to you.
And then I guess the other aspirational goal is how do we get more of these kids for longer periods?
Yes,
of time?
exactly. That's going to be part of meeting those benchmarks.
Right.
Is getting them and keeping them. And so I think one of the things that we can do is maybe, although it's a very small number, I think we could look at those children who we've been able to keep from 1 to 3 years. Look at their characteristics. Are they different in some way? Is the family engagement different in some way? Are they from particular centers, which would suggest that certain centers are better at keeping them or not? But we need to use those as kind of case examples at this point and see what may be coming out of that analysis to suggest where we move. Because I think that 10% per year is ambitious, given the situation that we're dealing with. The key is going to be figuring out how to get there. And that's where I think we've really got to, draw on the evidence-based literature, look at the quality that we're performing. Do we need to ramp up our expectations from our providers? We're raising those kind of questions as we look at the new QELI RFP that's going to be coming out, the new Quality Early Learning Initiative as well. And it'll be informed by some of the things that I do want to go back to something that Mr. McCurrick said, which I think is key. And that is, if you're looking at the performance of 4 and 5-year-olds, you cannot discount what happened to them in grades 0 to 3, because that's the foundation of their brain development. And the more we can do, and there actually are things that you can do in the 0 to 3 timeframe to promote literacy and numeracy for children that are that small. And so the more we can do in those very early years, that benefit is going to trickle up to the higher grades and the higher ages as we get to 4 and 5. And I'm delighted to see that the state of Florida is going to create an office which looks at 0 to 3, because I feel like they've been a neglected segment. And so that this kind of ripple effect as you go up the age ladder, if you don't start early, for many, particularly minority children, they never catch up. They never catch up. So we have really got to focus on those early learning years.
Mr. McCurrick.
Doctor, thank you for focusing in on some of the metric areas, because that was one of my concerns. The 11%, if we're only impacting 11% of those, one of two things. One, how can we do more? But also, how do we ensure that the 11% that we really do are at the highest level?
Absolutely.
That's extremely important.
Absolutely.
The other question I have, and maybe I took it out of context. You made a comment about, I think it was early learning centers needing to be 1.5 miles from the home. Was that correct?
Yeah, and that's one of the indicators used for the Child Opportunity Index.
So Pinellas County has 608 square miles in it. Is it realistic to think that there should be a early learning center every 1.5 miles?
Yeah, well, that's a national metric.
No, I understand, but
yeah.
that's where I'm getting to. Should we not start really honing in on our metrics to look at our place where we really are? If I looked at the state of Florida alone, if I run across 70, I run across 60, I run out there, there's a lot of farming, a lot of areas out there with hundreds of thousands of open acres that would never, you'd never hit those kinds of numbers.
Yeah.
So are we realistically looking at what is it for us that it really should be? What's that measurement? What should we really be looking at to then create the maximum model that fits our 11% or more, however it works? But how do we really hone in on that? Because that's where our metrics need to be. Our metrics, I believe, need to be, they're great ones out there. We look at them, they're all fine. Now let's hone them down into our backyard, where we can ensure that we're really focusing in on what the real needs are here, and the children here are getting the service that they need more effectively and more focused on their specifics.
Yeah.
Well, frankly, we're going to start when we put out the new QELI RFP on the areas of highest need. And what we find in our community is we have some very strong organizations that are likely to be able to do that, but they can't scale up to anything like that measure or any other measure that you might lay out there. But we've got to start somewhere, and they've got to develop the capacity and the capability to do what is essentially early Head Start, which really QELI is really early Head Start by another name. And the more of those we have in Pinellas County, the more strength we're going to find. But it's if we were to all say, yeah, we want 50 of them, or we want, it couldn't happen. We don't have organizations who could ramp up that quickly. And so we're trying to measure what are the organizations that we have that we know have strength, and what is their capacity, and add those by next year, with the thought that then as they develop capacity, we can add again, and we can add again. And there may be, we don't know, there may be some federal or state funds available for some of those equivalents.
Right. And
as well.
I think that when we can get closer to a realistic measurement of what is it that we really need, and then really take a good hard look at, is it, 11% that we're only going to be able to impact? Is it more than that? I don't know that answer, and I'm not trying to get to, but it just seems we're spending a lot of taxpayer dollars focused in on our children and the needs. And I don't care if it's one, it doesn't matter to me that we're spending those kind of money. What matters to me is that we do get an opportunity to do a lot more. And if we're only impacting 11%, then what is the real percentage we should be able to reach out to? And then, as we look at strategically our plan on how we're going to do this, then we have to build the associated resources or a link with those resources to meet that demand. But I struggle, I continue to struggle when I'm sitting here listening to the presentation, aspirational goals and the like, but also the fact that, again, I got to take me back to, we're impacting such a small portion of that with
Can I
what we're
offer
doing,
two
and we gotta do
comments
more.
on that? One, quality cost.
Mhm.
All right, and I think that's, if there's any lesson learned in this arena, is that you've got to resource these programs so that staffing, for example, we have been talking about staffing and the loss of staffing and the challenge of staffing. Some of that has to do with the base wage of people who are in early child care programs. So if you want quality people and you want to hold on to them, they have to be compensated, which drives up the cost. The other thing that I think I would like to see us do more is to train and replicate models that we know work, instead of treating everything as a new discovery. When we have a program that really works, how can we engage those people who are very competent in that area in helping us replicate and scale, whether it's through training or coaching and consulting? How do we bring in a cadre of new providers and train them in how to replicate what we know is a successful intervention? That's probably actually much more less expensive than trying to start up a new model over and over again. I would like to see us do more replication and scaling, education and coaching, maybe 2 or 3 center directors a year work under the tutelage of someone who really knows how to do this. And then they go out and set up their own centers, and then they do it for another 2 or another 3, and to really scale it out that way.
So it takes me back to what I started with early on with Dr. Greco's comments and the like about where we were headed. And that is, the more we can now focus in on what we're all doing and then what our impacts are individually, but bring those individual impacts in some way better together, so that we're not out there doing multiple things in different areas with different people, following different models, and trying to measure everybody on the same same point. It just doesn't work. So what really needs, I think, as we look out going forward, is let's really take a good hard look at what we've had, what's really working, what we know are successful, and what we can replicate and build on. But while we're doing that, let's do that in conjunction with a more focused program with those others that are having the 89% or whatever the number is out there, so that we can get a better linkage. Because all those children are going to eventually wind up in some educational program somewhere, whether it's in the school system, whether it's a private school, wherever it may be. But they're all going to eventually be there somewhere. And so if we're following a model that allows us to integrate and work closely together seamlessly through this process, then now I think we start to really make some bigger impacts, and we start to make some major leaps forward in the numbers that we're looking at. And one child not getting there is bad enough, and I can't accept it. Yet you've heard me say before that there might be a portion of our population that, as we begin to reset and rework on and focus on the earlier child and working through that, they may fall through the gap. I know we'll have to figure out something to do to help them, but we've got to get to where we reduce this number of children at fifth grade going back down again. We reduce the number, keeping children becoming more literate, more mathematically ready, more ready for involvement in a community going forward, while we're trying to help those that didn't get that opportunity. I don't know how else to put it, but I think that's the right direction, if it makes sense. And tell me if I'm not making any sense,
No, it makes
because
sense.
I would go back. We've got to really now, COVID gave us the opportunity to really now go back and look at those, but hone in on the values, on the value structure, and what's going to change. I don't know how much longer we're all going to do this, or how much longer we're all going to, not be able to, parents not wanting to send their kids to schools, or virtual learning continues on. I don't know what that's going to take. But what I do know is that we're going to eventually roll out of this, and we better be somewhere along the way, or we're going to be looking back.
I'm going to go ahead to Mr. Ongst, and you had your light on for a while. Thank you for your patience.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. I really appreciate the discussion. I think this is something that, first off, the data is extremely helpful, and something we definitely need to be aware of as board members and dive into with you all, and hopefully provide some direction. Could you go back to the slide that showed the percentage of kindergarten readiness by fiscal year? I think it was like the third slide.
Yeah.
There you go. It had the blue.
That one? No.
No.
The next one.
Next one.
Next one.
No, next one.
Next one.
No.
Nope.
It was the one where all the, it was like the fourth slide.
Yeah, this one.
Not that one. It was where basically, there you go. Showing that basically showing that we've plateaued, So this is extremely concerning to me. Obviously, I'm concerned with two areas. Number one is, can we grow the percentage of children that we're interacting with? That's huge. But number two, when we talk about quality, I would anticipate quality would get better results than this. And so I am concerned that whatever providers we're currently using or currently funding, I obviously, just looking at this, not knowing specifically who they are or what they're doing, I have serious concerns about whether what they're doing is efficacious, if there's efficiency there, I'm very concerned about this stagnation we're right around the 50%. I understand COVID, but it looks like this was a problem before COVID as well. And I totally agree, 90% is completely aspirational, and I'm not holding us to that standard, but I'm not sure how you're going to get 10% improvement year over year doing what we're doing now. So when is the Quelly RFP going to be? When do we anticipate that being ready?
April 1st. We promised it by beginning of April.
Yeah, to go out April 1st. I think in piggybacking on your comment, Brian, and on Mr. McCurrick's, as of today, we don't have qualified staff for the kinds of centers we need here in Pinellas County. And as Barbara mentioned, there will take not only increases in salaries that cost money, but education of those caregivers and teachers, and teaching and, let's say, apprenticeship of those people who lead and run those centers. This is a heavy lift.
It is.
And it will not, we're excited about this next procurement, but even when we do it, and even if we get a good group to do it. Their implementation is not going to be easy because they're in this environment that I just described.
Yeah.
And to expand it further, to Mr. McCurrick's point of more kids having access to quality, and I'm just talking right now about 0 to 3. I'm not even talking about the preschool, which has similar issues. There's a lot else that needs to occur.
Right. Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I really appreciate Dr. Morrison Rodriguez being on board full-time as a staff member to address this. And I know that's going to make a big, big positive impact on this. But I guess my point is, and even if you have to maybe delay the RFP a little while, I'd really like to see us critically think about what can we do differently, or how can we incentivize, higher wages, more teachers that want to come into this, or even different providers that want to get involved. If we can really kind of hunker down, because what I don't want to do is I don't want to release an RFP that's kind of repeating what we've been doing. And then we look at this and we have another 52% or 53% or something like that. So thank you all. I mean, my comments weren't meant to be critical. I think this is super important.
I'd like to make one comment on that, if I
Barbara,
might.
and
We've
then
had
Mr. Butler.
our first working session on the new RFP, and the first meeting, in my mind, this sounds macabre, but I wanted to do a postmortem. I don't know how to describe it. To just simply say, let's look at what has happened historically. What are the lessons in it? What do we identify as the most challenging components? That's where the staffing issues came to the surface. It's also sometimes where center leadership and the stability of the administration came to the surface as a very big issue. And what I have actually set up sort of a chart that looks at the major components of QELI, what we have had historically, and what are we going to do different this time around, and think about that analytically before we start writing the RFP. What is going to be done differently? And the final column is, what are the fiscal implications? So if we are told that the staffing mix needs to change and the base salary needs to change, what does that translate into in terms of dollar and cents that have to be enhancements to this model? We can't replicate what we've done before, I agree. We need to think systematically about how we're going to do something different. And then I'll be quiet after this final comment. As an evaluator, I am concerned with the validity of some of the ways that we are measuring reading performance. And I won't get into a lot of details now, except to give you one concrete example. If you are having children take reading readiness tests on computer programs and computer platforms, they have no computers at home, they are not competent in computer literacy. My question is, what are you measuring? Are you measuring reading competency, or are you measuring computer competency? And we have to challenge ourselves when we look at some of these measures. If you are talking about longitudinal research and the measure of reading readiness changes every 2 to 3 years, you're not comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges. So there's in research what we call real difference and artifactual difference. An artifactual difference is due to measurement error. So how much of these is really change, and how much of it is measurement error introduced by the way we're measuring performance? And we need to unpack that.
Mr. Butler?
Yeah, I was just wondering what the definition of a qualified instructor would be. Is it a certified teaching certificate?
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble here. I've been I can't figure out if I need hearing aids or if everybody is.
Okay, let's try this again. Can you hear me now?
A little better, yeah.
Okay. I was just looking for a definition of a qualified teaching instructor.
What qualifies a teacher? Is that your question?
Is it a qualified, certified teacher from the state of Florida or nationally?
Yeah, there are criteria for what are considered quality teachers. It has to do with academic experience. But one of the things we talked about, which is really critical here, is there is this almost, you know it when you see it, but hard to measure component of dedication to the enterprise, really good quality capacity for supervision and holding people accountable, and that you don't get from an academic degree. So I think that one of the challenges in this field is going to be, how do we get a sense of these things which are less tangible, but are critical to the success of managing a good quality childcare program? And we talked about that at the first meeting. We had some consultation from Dr. Rick Davis, who ran the Early Head Start Center, and his component was, it was these intangibles that made the most critical difference in the success of how those programs ran and what their results were. So in New Quelly, we're going to have to try to think of some creative ways to try to get a sense of that, either in terms of what we ask for, in terms of supporting information, or do we need to think about some kind of different interview process with some experts who come in? But we know that those are the things which put programs at risk when you don't have good, compassionate, caring, and concerned administration. It's a huge part of the equation, and it's the hardest piece to wrap your head around.
Okay, so when we go out on our RFP, are we mentioning the fact that these instructors have to be certified teachers? And if so, we would be in direct contract or contest with the school board on hiring teachers.
We
So
might.
I'm just wondering if we've already addressed that in RFP.
Well, I think it's something for us to consider, because everybody's after the quality person.
Right.
And there are not that many of them. So, you know, that's going to be a challenge. Matthew?
For 0 to 3 though, what would the academic credential be that you would look at? Not for the director, but.
Well, the Early Head Start suggests a bachelor's.
Okay, a bachelor's.
Bachelor's, yeah, a bachelor's degree, and preferably in something like early childhood education.
Preferably.
So that's, to me, that's a floor. That's where you start, and then you try to build on some additional qualities on top of that. Experience, I would say exposure to challenging children with emotional and behavior problems. Working with parents who are challenged economically, because a big part of what we heard was the staff's stress in dealing with parents. So your experience in dealing with parents who are challenged, your capacity for family engagement and outreach, all of those are the stuff I think that these really good programs are made of, and we have to figure out how we can assess for them. Yes, they do. We have to find a way to put them in. I don't know the cost per, I mean, I'm not that much of a fiscal person, but I would say, I'll go back to my point again, quality costs.
Right.
Right? So if we do it on the cheap, that's what we get. I mean, maybe that's a little crass, but.
But I think the point we're hearing over and over again, if we continue to do what we've done, shame on us. Right. I mean, I just think.
Yeah, I also think we need to know, the question's a valid question, but we really need to understand what is it in our minds, and what are we going to do to make this impact, and what's really going to take to make a change.
Yeah.
I won't get, there's all kinds of dollars that are being thrown around all over the place for all kinds of things. Yet we're struggling about whether or not we can spend, and not just us, but I mean, in general. So we've got to really all start to really hone in on, the future of this of this community and where we're going to go.
Yeah,
and
well,
how do
there's a
we help those
substantial
children be-
literature out there that suggests what quality components are.
Right.
And I think we really have to do our best to try to adhere to those as much as we can in the search and putting it together in the first place.
Right. And I think what we've been saying, and we touched on this at the last meeting, is we need to go back, revisit their strategic plan. There is future programming dollars in the budget. We have set aside unrestricted dollars. And again, this is the time. It's been said repeatedly that COVID, unfortunately or fortunately, gives us an opportunity to backstep just a minute and move forward in a different direction with dollars being assigned to that.
Yeah.
And I know it's a conversation I've had with Beth, and I'm continuing to put out here, as I did at the finance meeting. The dollars don't do any good unless they're in the community, but driven with our own strategic plan on what this board wants to spend its money on, and
Mhm.
that's what we've spent the last good amount of time talking about. So at this point, what I'd like to do is go to the last presentation and move our agenda along, if everyone is okay with that. All right, so we are on our last presentation, which is the Children's Mental Health Initiative update. It's an update led by Linda Leedy, and I think Becky Albert is also part of this conversation. Thanks, Becky.
Correct, just like Judith did with Chen, I'm going to sit here and Becky's going to do the presentation. When Becky's done, then I'll add some words.
We're saving the best for last. Good morning, I'm Becky Albert, Strategic Manager here at JWB. Today's presentation about our Children's Mental Health Initiative will depict our approach to transforming care and the progress that has occurred over the last 18 months when JWB first entered into an agreement with the Community Health Centers of Pinellas, which I'm also going to be referring to as CHCP. Most of you have seen this slide before. However, you may notice that the logos are becoming smaller in size, and that's because we are continuing to add organizations that want to be a part of this work. So this has been our 5-year timeline, and it demonstrates where we've been, where we currently are, and where we're heading. And despite a pandemic, our momentum has continued, and we are still on track to meet this year's deliverables. Essentially, we've been creating a blueprint, one child at a time, and it's these unique patient case reviews that are informing the workflow redesign and creating a more coordinated, comprehensive, high-quality system for children and their families. Our workforce is actively being trained on adverse childhood experiences, otherwise known as ACEs. The next step will be to increase the number of clinicians who can provide evidence-based interventions using a trauma-informed lens. I'm going to talk about the latest advances from our technology committee as it relates to the information exchange. And finally, I'll share our plans to grow this initiative. So, cross-sector collaboration means advancing the way that we currently conduct business with our existing providers, but it also means extending beyond the traditional partnership. Recently, Publix started offering COVID-19 vaccines. Todd Jones, the CEO, said, and I quote, "We know how important this vaccine is to people that we serve, and we are grateful we can expand to help our communities." Similar to Publix, and by way of this initiative, the Community Health Centers of Pinellas are constantly looking for ways to better meet the needs of children in our community. For instance, during one of our centralized oversight meetings, we heard about a child that was not adjusting well to kindergarten. And what we learned was this child did not participate in a VPK program, nor any early learning environment. As a result, CHCP willingly launched a VPK effort in partnership with ELC and our schools, of course, to target families with children who are eligible. The goal is to increase enrollment by offering families the assistance they need while they're already at the pediatrician's office, whatever the assistance may be, registration, reducing barriers, and so forth. CHCP is committed to a patient-centered approach and what is in the best interest of the children. So care coordination, this is a busy slide, it's complex, but it really gets down to the nitty-gritty of the work that we're doing. The Children's Mental Health team consists of multiple players, a patient care coordinator, a registered nurse, and a wellness coach. And basically what we're doing here with these tables is we're looking at data from last year and the first quarter of the current year, which is depicted by a different color. Your table on the right shows all of the tasks completed by our children's mental health team for children up to age 18. The table on the left is a subset of that data. And that subset includes children between the ages of 4 to 11, which is our population of focus that we intend to follow over time. And if you recall, this initiative is really aimed at prevention and early intervention, which is why we are looking at 4 to 11-year-olds separately. So the numbers on each of the bars within the charts are tasks that the team worked on, centered around the needs of the patient. Let me give you an example. Mom brings Becky to the pediatrician. Becky is a child who is autistic, nonverbal, and diagnosed with ADHD. The family is already receiving support from a variety of service providers. The problem? They are operating in silos and no one is talking to one another. Mom is trying her best to navigate the different service providers and systems while trying to remember the type of specialty doctor Becky last saw. It's confusing, it's frustrating, and it's time consuming. Mom is exhausted and she's on the verge of giving up. Tasks that may seem manageable for some are far from simple to others. So in steps this team, our children's mental health team within CHCP. And I talked about the different roles. Depending on the complexity of the case, we'll assign the type of team member that gets assigned. In Becky's case, it's going to be the registered nurse because this patient's needs are complex. And not only will this nurse assist with getting the providers talking to each other so that the care isn't disjointed or even duplicated, but the nurse is also getting support from mom, support that wasn't already in place. With the help of this initiative, much of the burden has been lifted from the caregiver. And more children and families are being identified earlier and connected to services sooner, including same-day behavioral health appointments. Okay, speaking of which, same-day behavioral health visits. So this chart clearly demonstrates that there has been increased access to same-day behavioral health visits in the current year, right now, of quarter one. Quarter one is all the data we have available. We'll continue to populate this table over time. It will assist us with identifying trends. But the takeaway here is, since this initiative started, you can see the increase in access. Now, you'll notice in quarter 2 and 3 of the prior fiscal year, that's when COVID happened. So CHCP was really working to pivot, to increase equipment needs and train staff so that they could provide telehealth, telephonic services so that children would not be without. So same-day behavioral health appointments, they're important. Why? Because it provides an opportunity to engage the family while they're already at the pediatrician's office. It's an approach that's supported by research to ultimately reduce emergency department visits, costs to the community, and lead to greater adherence with future appointments. In addition to same-day behavioral health visits, last year, a total of 508 children had at least one visit to a behavioral health therapist within CHCP, of which 40% were children between the ages of 4 to 11. So we are continuing to increase the skill set of adults who regularly interact with children by teaching the basic fundamentals of adverse childhood experiences, information that is necessary to more effectively respond to and support the needs of our children. The initial training focuses on what ACEs are and ways in which we can help children become more resilient, to persevere in times of difficulty, to have hope. Children are not born resilient. It's something that they are taught. Resiliency is learning how to cope and push through even in the darkest of times. And there will be dark times because no one is immune to adversity. Today, I'm sure we can all agree that everyone in one way or another has been impacted by COVID. We are partnering with Ultimate Medical Academy, who has agreed to integrate our ACEs training into its coursework for nursing students and medical assistants alike. In addition, Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital recently reached out to us inquiring about ACEs training for all of its hospital staff. That's pretty big. So far this year, we've delivered 24 ACEs trainings to more than 400 individuals. And of these staff members who have participated, 98% reported feeling confident to very confident in explaining and being knowledgeable about ACEs after the training. This is just the beginning. So technology. The technology committee is growing. So we must be doing something right because people want to join our table. Most recently, Pinellas County Health and Human Services, Central Florida Behavioral Health Network, and Pinellas County Sheriff's Office. Right now, the committee is focusing on technology that organizations are using, but it is not a one-size-fits-all, even when using the same platform. So I want to give you an example. Recently, I had to upgrade my phone. It's the iPhone, same. I went from a 7 to a 12, okay? Apple, no big deal, right? Should have been a seamless process. I back my phone up every night to the cloud. It wasn't. It required a level of manual effort. I had to update user information. Some of the features and functionality changed. I'm even having to ask my 11-year-old how to talk to text because the new phone doesn't come with a home button. So while we're connecting to more providers and systems, it's important to acknowledge that there are challenges similar to what I experienced with my new phone, but our challenges are on a much larger scale. If there were a magic wand that I could wave to fix everything, I would, believe me. That's not how it works. So while we're working to iron out the kinks with the connectivity, primarily including feedback loops, we are continuing to have substantial conversations about key data elements, information that is necessary to improving patient care. We are committed to getting this right because parents and caregivers have provided input on how we can improve, including removing the burden that often gets placed on the family to coordinate services for their child, to remember to get a prescription filled. We want to reduce the number of times that a family is being asked to provide the same information. Not only is it time-consuming, unnecessary, but in some situations, it's actually harmful for families who have experienced trauma. At the end of the day, technology should really help us provide real-time assistance and connection. And it should be as simple as getting an Uber. Expanding and scaling this initiative has been a goal since day one. The map on the left displays the initial locations where we started with the Community Health Centers of Pinellas. It's 5 pediatric practice locations represented by blue stars. We are now having preliminary conversations with the largest pediatric practice located in North County. This practice consists of 10 pediatricians. The map on the right displays the North County location, represented by a red star. Pediatricians from this practice actually participated in our REACH Institute that JWB hosted about a year ago in January. And since then, one of the doctors has communicated to us that 50 new patients she has identified as a result of the REACH training that she received. 50 new patients she's identified, diagnosed, and is treating with low to moderate mental health conditions. There is a need to integrate a behavioral health therapist into this practice, as well as support staff, similar to what we've done with the community health centers of Pinellas. So before I turn it over to Linda, I just want to say that the work we are doing is important, and we are making a difference in the lives of those that are being reached through this initiative.
Linda?
Thank you, Becky. I just want to note that today is Becky's birthday, so we brought her forward to make this presentation on her birthday. Well, I'll be brief. I just hope that you'll all agree that we really are making progress with this initiative, and we're really excited about the addition of our first new practice. They're thrilled, but you know, the devil's in the details, and this is JWB, and procurement's not easy, so we're beginning those conversations, but we're very excited. One phrase that's become kind of common lingo with the technology group is, has the patient landed? So a referring provider, whether it's the Community Health Centers of Pinellas, referring a patient to Suncoast, or PEMS referring a patient to Directions or back to Community Health Centers, the referring provider wants to know, did the patient go? Were they seen? Did they get treated? And what was the outcome? So when they come back, like Becky said, they don't have to retell their story. They pull it up in the medical record and they can see it. So that is the kind of connectivity we're working on. And as Becky said, we're looking at the data elements that are relevant for each participant, because, for example, the schools don't want certain protected health information, but other medical providers can exchange this. So we're working through the different variables, and then also looking at the Care Connect system and how to make those systems talk better to each other through direct secure messaging protocols. So we will be coming back to you with additional funding requests related to that additional practice, as well as some connectivity suggestions. But beyond the specifics of the Children's Mental Health Initiative, we all know that the impact of COVID has exacerbated the mental health issues throughout the county at all ages, but certainly our kids who are in school or not in school, virtual or not virtual. And we know that as these patients are we're beginning to help them land in these settings, these providers need additional resources to build the capacity to be able to help more and more kids who are landing. So I know Beth is going to talk a little bit about this in her CEO report, but we have been speaking with our current mental health providers to see what their needs are to be able to help our community through this situation. So any questions for Becky or I?
Yes, Mr. McCure?
I mean, very good presentation. Thank you so much for this. And I'm really happy to see how it's really taking hold, and to hear about all children wanting to have staff done, but that'll bring up another question. I don't see all children's name on here. Do I miss them?
Yeah,
Are they on there? Oh, okay. So they're paid for their own training to be done in this process.
Well, the ACEs training is being provided free to the community through the staff development person at the community health centers.
Oh, perfect.
That
Okay.
JWB is funding.
So we're funding.
Yep.
Okay. So that's good, and that's going on. And in the future, I would assume that there's going to be more requests for broader funding in those spaces, and would love to see the partners also participate in that funding. But great news. I'm really happy to hear that that we're making these kinds of strides, maybe even a little faster than I thought it might happen, only because hospitals and groups and doctors seem to kind of slow down as they work through this stuff. So it's good to see that they're not, and that they're moving on. And I commend you for good work that was been done, and hopefully continue driving it. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Malo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you. What a wonderful presentation. I just want to comment, my experience has been is that has the patient landed is a very common concern. And so to have that on-site same-day referral is just brilliant. And that's the type of thinking outside the box that will change this. So thank you for that.
And I agree Excellent presentation. Thank you. I think we all agree the issue of children's mental health in this county and actually nationwide is a huge issue, and it's very much front of mind here. And as Beth will probably give us a report about needing to put additional dollars in this initiative, we're good. So I again, thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Mr. Bartlett.
I just have one question. I think Linda kind of alluded to this a little bit in her presentation, but Becky brought it up in hers about the issue when you have a collaborative group of providers taking care of a child, and the child moves through the system and progresses as they grow older. There are different providers that have what you refer to as different silos. So this person doesn't talk to this person didn't talk to this person. That was an event that happened with the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas situation down south. Was the individual who's responsible for that was getting a lot of health care, but from different areas of the system. So as he would progress to another school because of his behavior issues in this school, these providers wouldn't talk, they would not talk back and forth. So consequently, they looked at it as a first time approach on every situation, and the history that he carried or she carried will never follow with you. So are we doing something about, I know we have HIPAA and other restrictions with the mental health and everything else, but is there some effort to bring together information among the providers as that child would move forward into different aspects of the treatment and care?
Well, and let me first begin by saying that we wouldn't be this far along without the school district. They have been a fabulous partner in this work, and they sit in on our weekly meetings with the cross-sector team that Becky elaborated on. And now we've gotten to the point where before the weekly presentation happens, we the CHCP sends over the patient to the school district to see what the issue is or why they're connected or not connected. So then we have our weekly meetings. The school district is reporting out, oh, we looked into that kid, and this is what the teacher's reporting, this is what the counselor's reporting. So then we do the staffing with that information in hand. And Mike Callie and Donna Sicilian are doing a fabulous job and following up. So at least at the school district level, there's a lot of conversation, and now we're offering releases of information and consents to be signed by every patient when they show up in the community health center, so that there's not another barrier for the patient to come back and sign a form so that they can talk to the school counselor. That's happening with the initial visit. So at least the communication with the school district is really, really good, and really they're on board. And as the idea here is we haven't gotten there, but yes, there's going to be messaging between the different providers, so they're all going to be able to see, what happened, what treatment that kid got, and if they were referred, why not. And then the wellness coaches and the patient care coordinators are following up with phone calls to see if the family got to the appointment, and if not, calling the family back to find out why not. So it's an iterative process. We're getting there, but that's the goal. Yes, that everybody will be that can see the specific information with respect to the parameters of HIPAA and all the other privacy laws can do so.
Just leads to more informed decisions and treatment processes as that child moves forward. And it's really important. And that's one of the programs that the sheriff's office is bringing up now with the mental health awareness and everything else. But one of the factors that they've tried to overcome is the siloing of the information, so that it's to those that it should be available to, it is available, and they can go forward knowing the historical information, which gives you a better informed decision.
Well, we were really pleased that the sheriff's office did start coming to our technology committee. So, I mean, it's thrilling that they want to be at the table too.
All right, Beth?
We've had a long meeting, so I'll just give you a few previews to our next meeting. We've talked both about literacy and we've talked about mental health. And we have strong programs in both of those arenas, but we know we're not coming close to touching everybody who needs to be touched. So as I mentioned earlier, it's not that easy to just put money out. There aren't magically people who have the right credentials or organizations who can scale up. But we've contacted each of our funded mental health agencies and said, if you had more funding, what could you do that would in fact reach more people, broaden what you do. And then we're in the process of putting that back through our lens. You would not be surprised. Some of them are very coherent, they make perfect sense. Others are sort of cats and dogs, and we're not going to fund any cats and dogs. So we're in the process of looking through those proposals and expect to bring those proposals to you as budget amendments for organizations we already fund. The same thing will be true with literacy. We expect to, now that we have had this full cycle with the literacy organizations, we want to see what else they can do. Some of them are out of school programs. Can they go to 3 more schools? Some of them are church-based. Can they open a second location? Are they prepared, and do they have the bandwidth to do that? And so those discussions are, and in one case, can they open a summer program? So we're having those discussions with organizations who've already had good results with us, and expect to bring back those proposals to you at the April board meeting. And otherwise, I will leave it at that, except to say your staff at the JWB are working incredibly hard. It's everything that ever had to be done before is being done plus, plus everything that COVID means. It's not so hard to work in the virtual environment or the work impact of COVID. It's just, there's just more of it. And I'm sure many of you are finding the same things and are not crying tears for us, but I did want you to know your staff are all working very hard.
I have some additional questions, but do you know what? After a very long meeting, we'll wait till next month and hear some of the decisions about some additional dollars being applied to the mental health, to the literacy. And I know we'll hear more about the staffing patterns at Juvenile Welfare Board. So I look forward to next month. In May, if I heard correctly, our presentation will focus on the 0 to 3 work that's been done. So looking forward to that. Is that May?
That's May, but our next board meeting is
April
8th.
April 8th. I look to Ms. Flynn. Do we have any requests for public comment? Okay. Then Mr. Butler, do you want to let us know about a couple of anniversaries we have here? Wow. That's a big one. Very good. Very good. Seeing no lights for public comment, I call for an adjournment. We're moved. We'll see you April